Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarian.
Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarian.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarian.
Ooh, yeah. Our world's in peril.
Oh, yeah.
How's it going? So I
Welcome.
was trying to come up with like a name for an episode because I keep thinking that they should be less and less conspicuous. So the name should be something like with the word normal.
Less occult, you mean?
No, well, I think mild recession, or if it's maybe the episode should just be called like a perfectly normal episode, like or like nothing to see here, something like that. We're gonna have to start doing something like that.
Perfectly normal day within the 21st century.
Yeah, exactly. Everything is exactly the way it always is, like so that way if you know, you're not saying it's not that way, but you're just anyway. Raph, how are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing surprisingly well, I'd say. How are you?
Well, are you just old enough that you're not worried about being conscripted into military service? Is that what this week's
pretty
about?
Pretty much, probably. Yeah. I mean, not really. I guess if there is a full-fledged, how do you call it, mobilization of Austria, I would totally be called in because I actually did military service. Funnily enough,
Right.
Conscript stuff, right?
They just get you to. They're like, there's no war, so it's no big deal. You can just come join and maybe. What did you do? Nice things? Did you have fun times? Did you like humanitarian aid? What was your service like?
No. So the thing is, in Austria, still you regularly, like everyone who's 18 has to go to the army, and because I want to say in this instance, at least, luckily, we're not comparable to Israel, meaning there is no 3-year mandatory, become a sharpshooter or something. Stuff, but rather you just get stuck in like basic training for 2 months, depending on where you're going to be sent later. It's more or less harsh. And I was in a group full of people where they already knew these are going to be the, how you call it, system maintainers, so like cooks and stuff.
Yeah,
so
I was going to say, you look like you'd be a great cook,
Yeah, no, I wasn't. Luckily, I didn't have to, because then you'd have to be there every day. I actually had luck because they assigned the jobs before then moving to the actual station where people were, cooking and guarding and all of that. And then they opened up a spot actually for like the guard, but the in-house guard, which is more like a portier, where you just sit at the entrance. So I was just sitting there, putting in people, backdating them or whatever if they were too late, being friendly with everyone. And at night, being the only one left there, socializing with whoever, more or less insane or not, individual is left at the garrison,
Wow.
So yeah, but it was cool because basically you had like 26-hour shifts and then 2 days off. So it was like nice, go home, sleep, and yeah.
Oh my god. So
yeah.
But you have not horrible stories then. It sounds like you met some pretty interesting, there's some cool people like yourself, if everybody in Austria has to do it.
No. Well, I mean, well, I would like to understand the logic of what you just said, because then I would be like, oh, everyone in America is pretty much like Andreas, There's people like you. I wish.
No, but there's a chance. You're telling me there's a chance.
Definitely. Actually, just today I spoke about it to a friend. There were like a few people that were, I don't even know what to say, also because I don't want to talk bad about people. Everyone has a different culture, different background, more or less mainstream, more or less boring or whatever. There were a few okay people, I guess. It was just really interesting to see the military from inside. I mean, I guess in the US, many people have experience, right? But even just the idea of you salute to them, what's the, packing order and so on, how do you talk to whom? And also even just technically who would be responsible, because in the job I didn't even have to have a weapon because I was the inside guard. There were outside guards with actual weapons, rifles, right?
Wow.
I didn't need to carry anything.
But
luckily.
You still had to be trained, right? To use
Sure,
it?
I did have to be trained, but we did maybe like 2 shooting exercises. It was actually pretty fun, I have to say, because we had, in Austria, they have this Steyr AUG 77, which is like one famous weapon. I think even in Counter-Strike, there's variants of it. The weapon itself, I was actually, I don't know, I don't want to say impressed. I never really shot a weapon, but I thought it was a pretty decent weapon, It's like a, how do you call it, assault rifle or something, I guess. But yeah, we didn't do lots of training in that. And just then what I wanted to say is it's interesting in a way if you then insert it into this hierarchy, because technically as the guard of the building, let's say, I was the highest in rank, like automatic superseding everyone on the same level, and everyone there was on the same level except the actual officers, who at night there was one officer at the whole base or something, right?
Interesting.
So this would mean that technically you're allowed to give orders or whatever, or ensure the safety and so on. I never had to do anything, but it was just stupid things like people have to clean their rooms and they have to clean something else in the building, you know. And then the officers told me, oh, make sure they're doing this. Then you stand in front of these guys, you know, they're already bored out of their minds after 10 hours shift, and they don't want to clean. And so on, you're like, please, can you please do it, you know, because I'm also only the middleman in this case, you know.
Oh wow, so it's like peer pressure, like North Korean mind control. Damn.
A little bit at least. So it's a minor thing, you know, but it's just an interesting experience. And I thought back to
or is that
book.
just Austrian civility? But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, I thought back to a book. I don't exactly remember the name, unfortunately. It was like about the, how would you call it? Find a neutral term. The expansion or the buying in of then so-called Jewish individuals in Israel, or like this process of what happened, and, you know, different perspectives. I think something with Rose. I don't know the term exactly anymore. But anyhow, there they mentioned that the Jews, and even David Ewing Jr. talks about this, that they're often like put into the middle of things, you know, like as a heat shield, right? And then I was kind of like, I was wondering to myself, like, oh, am I in this position that I had just read about in this book, you know, that you get pressure from above to perform, you get pressure from below, where like, oh, don't be like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, there was
psychology.
There's a couple examples. North Korean mind control sticks out as well. I think both of them are like CIA associated or adjacent. But what's interesting that you bring up Israel is interesting because, you know, Israel as a state is a very interesting state, and it does this military conscription as well. But a lot of Europe has done this for a long time before it. And after the Gaza Strip invasion, they used German military equipment surplus from World War II, things left over from Germany, and Germany continued.
What does this remind me of?
Yeah, it was. You're right. It's hard not to notice that this kind of looks like, you know, this is a group of people who believe that they're God's chosen master race. But which group is it? Right? It gets kind of confusing at a certain level. I don't know, but the reason I wanted to think about the North Korean mind control was because will they find pictures of soldiers?
Just on the point of North Korea briefly, I think I watched, I mean, it's always the same footage basically, except maybe you can find 1-2 interesting movies. Actually, anyone who has recommendations for North Korea movies, please post them in the chat. For some reason, maybe because of watching Attack on Titan or something, you know, where they also start off from this island, I'm super fascinated with North Korea because it's the perfect example also for research. How easily can you brainwash a population? And here it's like official that they're completely brainwashed, right?
Well, and how brainwash is a weird word. You know, it's gaslighting, I think we say. They're told one scenario information and we're told another. But what they usually, when they talk about the Americans who were brought to North Korea, and they were, after a few months, sending films back home, like Stockholm Syndrome, that they said, you know, we have to fight for Marxism and we have to stop the American imperialism. Like, what are you talking about? Your name is Billy and you're from Kansas. Why would you ever be a Marxist? Why would you ever be against America? And so they called that mind control. But the problem is, I wish I could find the, when you start to look into some of these people who came over there, some of them wanted to stay in China or North Korea. Some of these people were defectors. And the question is, were they really defectors? Maybe they weren't mind controlled. Maybe it was just that in America, they'd had one case of information mind controlling them. And then they came over here and they're like, oh, I never heard that version of it before.
No, definitely. I completely agree. All I want to say with let's not call it brainwash. Let's just say cultural setting or whatever, or how to create a nation state and how to make it appear normal and as if ever given within only 3 generations.
This is a functioning system, right? Yeah. This is a functioning system that
really believe it, right? And then we have to, and just the basic simple step is, why would we ever assume that we are not in exactly the same situations as the so-called North Koreans, but just on one more higher level of refinement in terms of the psychological operation that's being performed on the populace at large? And I mean, I think by now it should be obvious, but this is, I think, an important thought, because otherwise always like, oh, these poor North Koreans, they're brainwashed. Yeah, who says that not exactly the same thing happens here? But of course, it's made in a way that it's not too blatantly obvious. Yeah.
I mean, how crazy is it that a dude from Virginia ended up making propaganda films for Kim Jong-il? He was one of the actors in his film, right? And so Joe Dresnok, if you want to watch some North Korean films, he's a star in a lot of them, which is kind of interesting. So there's a lot more going on in North Korea than I think people realize. But the big thing was peer pressure. because you had a lot of these guys and they'd be in a group together and they'd say, why aren't you doing this? If you don't do this, none of us get to eat. You know, if we don't all do this together, we can't get what we need. So it really forces you to feel like you're doing it for each other instead of for,
I think that's what all this war stuff is based on, because anytime from what I've heard, anyone talking about it, it's always like, oh, I want to protect my friends. I want to protect my squad. So it's like, you know, tribal, I don't know, something high school fight. And it's not even that you hate the other side or something, or maybe not even ideologically convinced of whatever, but you're put in a super dangerous situation and you just want to protect your most immediate friends. And that can result in killing the other group of friends.
But they're poor mothers, you know, because the thing was, they're like, I believe my son was mind washed and all this stuff. And it's like, part of the deal is if you're raised in America or in any country, you're washed with whatever, you're saturated, you're conditioned, your brain conditioned, right? Like you're using conditioner and it's a rinse and repeat all day with American media. And this was with 3 to 8 channels, you know what I mean? Guy born in 44. So him seeing America one way and then seeing the world another way, it might be that brainwashing is actually the correct term, because he's removing conditioning. He's like, whoa, there's so much conditioning in America. I mean, just to acknowledge that doesn't necessarily mean you should become North Korean. And I think that's the other irony, is that North Korea is probably a controlled state, right? Like whether it means to be or not, it's everything is kind of surrounding it in a sense, and they've controlled its economy and they controlled its agriculture and they've controlled its population, you know. So it's kind of terrifying to notice how scary America is. And then they're saying, oh, well, you know, he's no longer thinking for himself. It might not be that. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, no, I completely agree with you. And that's also, for example, why I love your interview with Dugin and so on, because to really find a viewpoint that's completely apparently opposed or something doesn't mean it's more correct than one that one has been conditioned into, but then at least I have a broader spectrum of possibilities and understanding, and I can maybe find at least some actual, you know, beneficial path, which may be something different, but at least I expanded the map. And most people don't even realize, you know, they're running around with a really small piece, even though they may be super cultured within, let's say, Western American, European culture, but it's about, you know, values and many more things. So
Kibbutz comes up as well, right? So this is a very interesting formation of Israeli culture, and it came into the state of Israel from Europe. It's a kind of socialist community, right? Intentional community in Israel, traditionally based on agriculture. So it's a socialist kind of kibbutz, is like what would we say, like a Soviet. It's like a Soviet. You've got a group of people that are a collective. They all kind of own the community together. It's a utopian community, right? It's very similar to the 19th century utopian communities like New Harmony. And you'd bring in, look at the kind of way that you're raised in a kibbutz, right? Like you're raised to defend your land. You're raised to be one with the herd, one with the community.
To be clear, wasn't New Harmony the one we mentioned some time ago, which was somehow completely burnt down or something like this, or some?
So New Harmony, so New Harmony was originally created by Robert Owen, and Robert Owen was, if you think of Marx as the people's communism, then you think of Robert Owen as the state's communism. So his whole push was building factories, and not just that, but homes, like apartment buildings and a community around his factories. And so if you worked there, you lived there. It's like how Walt Disney has it, so that you're being watched all the time when you're working there, and you have to wear clothes that everyone can see because everything's glasnost. So he had curfews. You had to go to bed at this time. You had a diet of food that was organic that they made there, right? They grew the food. So that was how you spent your time. You spent your time doing certain leisure activities that you electives that were assigned, and your children would be educated. There's a school there, right? So the entire community is owned by the state, owned by the corporation rather. And the corporation, the owner, he then can make sure that these children are healthy of the workers, and they're educated to how to run the machines, so that there'll be another stock of.
And my private multi-generational army, or how you would call it.
Exactly. So what it is somebody,
replicating.
You take a corporation, and a corporation takes a state. A state has resources, and then it refines those resources. If you consider the people to be a resource, then socialism becomes a kind of managerial theory. You're feeding them all in order to keep your resources healthy and sustainable, and you're also trying to refine them into better slaves, doctors, scientists, lawyers, engineers, whatever you want to own, right? So Owen built this, and it was such an interesting idea in Europe and Britain that it was spread across gross mercantilism and brought it across Holland. And he did a joint session in front of Congress and House of Representatives telling Parliament all about Owenism. And so they decided, okay, let's do it. And one of the first projects was New Harmony. Now, there's a lot of communities around America that have taken Owenism into effect in some way, but mostly corporations. Corporations still love, like Steve Jobs loved Owenism. Owenism was very popular with Mao. Mao thought Owenism was interesting. Before the cultural destruction of everything pre-Mao, like Owenism was more interesting than Marx to a lot of the socialists. Anyway, they built New Harmony, and the idea was everyone would have to be working there, but they're like artists and they're intellectuals, and they're not very good farmers, and they didn't have a way to really equalize it. I mean, it was theoretically true that everybody needed each other. Like, you can't have a society without someone keeping the roads clean, but nobody directly felt like the road cleaner was benefiting society enough. And so people wanted to have the more important seeming jobs. And so there was no way to really have this just be this integral society. So in a lot of ways, they say it fell apart, right? That the community couldn't last, but they had several decades of attempts to keep it going. And across America, tons of other Owenist-like communities did work, but they tended to be churches, like almost all of them turned into religions. And so like cults, like American cult movement in the 20th century becomes really strong. A lot of the time or 19th century even, sometimes it's hidden as Christianity when it's not actually Christianity. But the hope with Owenism was that a corporation could do it, and it wouldn't have to be religious. It wouldn't have to be that the church owns the monastery, I think is kind of the idea.
It's only the religion of money.
Right.
Or what would it be?
Well, I mean, that's so the thing with colonialization is you're trying to establish your ideology and you're trying to permeate it. So you have to find a place to root it down, right? And the other thing is you're modeling it. So once it's there, all the parts of it are seeing how things are working and they're in it. So the kibbutz is an interesting system because it took kids and it really adapted them. I mean, I remember a lot of these people lived outside, were nomadic, or some of these kids a lot of these kids were from Europe, completely from cities, and to put them into farmland and to give them, this new connection to the earth, to the property that they have to maintain and take care of it, rather than, you're just living in somebody else's ghetto or somebody else's apartment. It became more and more important that you protected your land, you protected your family, protected your people, and you fell in love with each other, So the kibbutz was a really interesting way to create the cultural identity of Israel. And it's essentially the same technique. These
Definitely, of course.
That little boy is like 8 years old. He's holding a machine gun. Like, that's amazing. Good job.
Yeah. And the only thing I'm wondering about, of course, is how many individuals have gotten displaced so that those individuals can move in. And then, of course, the ugly thing is, like you say, they get trained in defending it. But already, just because of the creation of the whole thing, there may be animosities. I mean, they had wars. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah,
well, 23andMe has had some issues because there's a lot of people in Israel that are not actually Jewish by descent that have come over from the Soviet Union, and so that's starting to come out more and more, whether it was by choice or whether they were taken. Right. So there's going to become a point where everything gets further confused by that because Israel's created an identity, right? And that identity is separate entirely from Judaism or anything like that. I mean, for instance, most of the prime ministers are pretty much atheists, right? So it's, at least they say they are, Yeah.
Yeah. So ultimately, I'd like to, show some of the pictures just to do, I mean, this is the most basic type of ground research I can do. And I sent you, thank you, Waffle House, for the grift, as always,
bro. We love you.
So Yeah, and some pictures that I made just yesterday or something, walking around Vienna, because I just want to basically show them and ask like, is it like everywhere like this? Can
Is
you?
this the first one, or do I go back to the other
This
direction?
is 1 second. You.
Does it get? Can you see it large when I open it, or no? It won't let me do it.
No, no,
Oh.
no. Of course, no. It's
So
always
one
the
second.
window sharing issue.
I have a plan.
Yes.
Let's see. How do I make it not full screen, but also make it bigger? There's got to be a way to do that. Oh my god.
Or if you find the download folder for them, there you can have it. So basically, it's always the same question. What is with these buildings? Why do they have windows like halfway in the floor? And why are so many buildings which are obviously red brick and they are concreted up? And there's just a few examples. And what I want to get at basically is, when have these buildings been dated? Because especially in Vienna, there's so many of those. You call it Altbau, so old building. And this usually just means you have pretty high ceilings and usually very nice facades if they have not been already redone with concrete, and then they may look kind of normal or unseeming, let's say, not very how do you call it, suspicious or peculiar. But then you go inside, you find there's all these decorations. They're usually renovated inside, really beautiful, really high ceilings, and then they put some kind of a year there, and oftentimes it's something along the lines of 1904, 1906 or something, for a certain class of buildings at least. And by now I've become highly suspicious of any type of dates put anywhere. And so, yeah, I just like to know maybe if there are similar buildings in the US, and what class this kind of buildings could be if they actually are older than they have been dated, or what the real purpose and reasoning
Do you want to
is.
try to share the screen on from your side? I'm having a really hard time getting
Okay,
it to do it. I'm sorry.
let me see. Give me a second. Yeah. The other thing you could do meantime, there's 2 videos I posted in the chat. These are just interesting ones, just to briefly take a look. Then there's the Astrolabe, and then the 4th one about the language will be a story, which I'll come back to. And while you
Okay.
show it, I'll try to get the screen sharing to work.
You got Zachary Denman Imperial Children video here, and talking
It's
about
just really
the orphan
fascinating about the like a theory for repopulation, which seems, because it's always so confusing talking about it, and it seems pretty stringent. Whether it's completely true, we'll find out, but making a good argument and well produced.
Interesting. During the time of the famous Russian Empress Catherine the Great, conceived the idea of the vagrant infants from Great Tartaria could be housed, and hence both the Russian Empress and the education reformer Evan Betskoy decided that the foundry in the home should be constructed for such a purpose. Foundling home. The Moscow orphanage was also called the Foundling Home. Started on the 1st of September 1763. The inspirational experiment became a part of the Age of Enlightenment and was intended by the Catherine the Great and the educational reformer Ivan Betskoy to manufacture communities to the perfect citizens for the Russian state by training and conditioning over 65,000 vagrant infants to a very high standard of cultural refinement. Whilst they received professional qualifications despite more than adequate staffing and financing, the Moscow orphanage was not able to initially reduce infant mortality. By the 23rd of April, 1869, the Russian Emperor Alexandria II of Russian Council Ministry and Imperial Russian government collectively decided that some of the infants should be transported into Poland and elsewhere in Eastern Europe. During the many years of the upheaval, numerous infants and families would eventually be transported into Eastern United States from Tartaria in northern Russia, with an unusual article that was published on the page 3 of the newspaper calling for Washington Union. It confirms the great Tartaria. I keep missing the article. Where does it show the newspaper article? There you go. New feature, private boxes. Right, yeah. French Tartarian. Madame Anne Bishop will also be there. Singing your favorite ballad, John Anderson by Joe, Last Rose. Will sustain 7 distinct characters in appropriate costume. Russian, German, English, French, Tartarian, and Italian. Right. Tartarian communities. Comparison with the Uralic language. $13.8 million
right.
Eastern Europeans.
Thank you for entertaining us. Meanwhile, I finally believe I managed to set up, yes, the proper window for the share.
Nice work.
So these are just a few images, like from almost, not really, but almost like a random building in Vienna. There's so many of those, it's incredible. Also in different districts, which would certainly seem like they would be, when the Stahlfort was still there, I guess they would have been the suburbs. But officially, they have been created around, just as it says here, 1904. So one thing I'd also love to know from chat or whatever, if you've seen these kind of things in the US. I mean, I've even been myself. I don't know, for example, those things. There are official drawings in like the National Austrian Library or something from the Imperial time, let's say around 1850, where you have like one or two companies and also quite a few famous architects drawing these things, of course, also much more complex than here. The suspicious thing here is that one of them, for example, is, I believe his name is Friedrich von Schmidt. And he, for example, built the high school I went to, Akademisches Gymnasium, which I always go on about, which is an obviously old world Tartarian building. And his plaque is just put there. So there, it's the big question also, have these been designed and placed in? Because I heard some Tartarian theories where they do say that in these buildings with high ceilings, these railings were just put in afterwards. So could it really be that 150 years ago they were put there? Or may they be somewhat remnant of an older culture before, let's say, the revolutions of 1848? So I'll just continue. Here we see, this is also, of course, to anyone with the most basic occult knowledge.
I'm going to get this floor. That's my squad goal. Squad goal. We all got to do it.
It's like the super suspicious. So number one is the huge checkerboard floor. Why are these in so many buildings? And even if it's, whether it's from 1900
kids
or whenever.
Can play chess. Go back to sleep.
Yeah, but they are certainly carried over. It's always the same. And if you go there and it's like a larger one like this, you'll see it kind of like from the side or from the right angle. It looks like super trippy. And then, of course, here, what is this? In Greek or in a German translation, you sometimes call it running dog, but we could also say it's, rolling Swazi or something. Interesting. And these are the same in so many buildings, this kind of pattern on the ground floor. Yeah. Have you ever seen those, Andreas? I mean, in Europe, maybe, but in US, do they have the same or are they different?
It depends. In San Francisco.
Oh yeah, here you have a larger image. So I mean, this is super trippy. If you
in the older buildings in the 1800s in San Francisco or San Jose, the ones that still have anything left, there are floors that are kind of Masonic like this for sure. I'm not sure about the swirl. The swirl could be, a lot of things. It could be the sun and it could be a positive duality. It's kind of the yin yang in a sense.
Which I mean, will also be interesting in a,
it does feel like a very useful thing. If you were like, I would like to make a movie about a guy who has to go around doing magical rituals, like really practically. It's like, oh man, we need a checkered floor. So they're like doing it in a lobby to a hotel. They have to do their whole ritual on this floor, right? Because it's got maybe that ring is it from escaping the square.
You have a ritual floor on every level. How convenient for all the neighbors to gather every day.
Yeah.
So
but maybe not every floor, because remember H.P. Lovecraft, he was really not into being several stories up. Like you and me are several stories up. He likes to be on the ground, and he didn't like to be underground. He wouldn't take tunnels. He wouldn't go on the subway.
So these large ones are usually on the, I mean, I would now say ground floor, but if you look here, this is also actually have to go upstairs to even get here. So again,
the tunnels and underground thing, the basements, like that Lovecraft wouldn't go in basements, is really interesting to me in the Tartarian perspective. Like, why wouldn't he want to go to the ground floors? The original levels.
So it's nothing like too fancy, but just have these kind of railing things, which I always find interesting.
I do love ironwork.
Ironwork, which can of course be remade now and so on, but still about the motives. I'm like, because it's not like a Christian cross stuff or something, and it's so oftentimes floral patterns, right? Even though there is this one god, I think it was not Martin Liedtke, it was someone else who pointed this out, that there is a god related to, I believe, fish, fruit, and something else, and some kind of like So there may be correlations here. So even here, railing, like really, I think nicely done. Yeah, and this is a basic one, right? Then you can't see it so well, but these are the decorations. Of course, they have been remade, but also like some kind of floral patterns. Yeah. So this is then the stamp they put on it. And I've been inside different buildings where they have a similar timing. And yeah, I'm like,
so one of the things I found was that
yeah.
Oh, just go back to the last bit there, the number, the 1904. There we go. Yeah, it's interesting because they're also starting to copy these with molds, and then they're trying to make duplicates of them places as well. So we can't be sure anymore if the numbers are the same or if they're changing numbers.
And there's probably a city like this in China, rebuilt recently.
Well, you've been to the Berlin Museum of Samaria, right, of Alexandria?
I haven't actually, even though I've been to Berlin, but no. Yeah.
Bruh, you gotta go there sometime, yeah.
Totally. So in here, just to show, so this is like officially like the bicycle room or something, but here again, just interesting, there's stairway down. Of these, we have especially many in Budapest. There's so many of those, it's incredible. And here's just like kind of to show the level. Yeah, also, of course, yeah, nicely done. Even here again, floral pattern. This reminds me again of the Sassanid, or it's X for Exertus, of course. Yeah. And then here again, as with the Gemeindebau, the council housing, you have the concreted up thing, and then below it's red brick and some small,
glass
windows.
of the door. Yeah, what's left of the door.
So there's many of those, and here you can see it from a bit, for more afar, but you can obviously see there's the red brick below. Why would I even concrete this up? Even here on the windows, you can see. Like, why? Because this is ugly. That's my basic thing. This is
stucco.
ugly in comparison.
I hate stucco. Yeah.
And this patterning and so on is much nicer. And today, if you would build a house, you would have to pay a lot more for the lower style, I guess, on average, because it's just more fancy. So why even do that? What they want to hide. So, okay, small. Here you can also see the level change. I mean, this is obviously concreted up, but still, wow. I mean, why? What is this? Then to even enter again, you have to take steps. Okay, whoever, everyone can design their houses how they want. You have many of those, Then also you have this interesting stucco or facades. Probably looks more fresh, but you have a lot of those on the Parliament and so on. And this is like just, again, seemingly random housing building in Vienna. This is nothing special or fancy. Yeah, I think we're through. Yeah, so nothing too special, but like I said, this is like a random normal street or building in Vienna, and there's so many of those. And I always wondered, like, what's going on, right?
I just want to show really quickly the Berlin Museum because, they literally just have Babylonian temples inside. I mean, it's crazy. Like, they brought all of the stones, they brought all the pillars, or something else is going on because, it's all there. Where's the Sumerian, like this room here, open it up. That's like inside the museum. It's crazy. So I don't know. That always blows my mind. You could easily pick something up and put it somewhere. Well, maybe not easily, but think about the Ethiopian obelisk. You know what I'm talking about? So the obelisk of Axum. So at one point, this obelisk was in Ethiopia, and it was 160 feet tall, or was it tons? And I forget how tall. It's pretty tall, 79 feet. And then in 4th century, etc. Then it's brought by the Italians, I think, to Italian occupation in 1937. They take the obelisk of Axum to Italy as war booty. The monolith was cut into 3 pieces and transported by truck along the tortuous route between Axum and the port of Massawa, taking 5 trips over a period of 2 months. It traveled by ship, Ottawa, arriving in Naples on March 27th, 1937. It was then transported to Rome, where it was restored, reassembled, and erected on Porta Capena Square in front of the Ministry for Italian Africa. This square would later become the headquarters of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and the Circus Maximus. ancient Roman chariot racing station. The obelisk was officially unveiled on October 28th, 1937 to commemorate the 15th anniversary of the March on Rome. The operation was coordinated by Ugo Monaret de Villard. A bronze statue of the Lion of Judah, symbolizing Ethiopian monarchy, was taken along with the obelisk and displayed in front of Termini railway station. Eventually, they returned it. I forget what the deal was. Later returned in 1967. No, was it? Yeah, the Monument of Judah was returned in 1967. Then 50 years later, it was like the first steps of dismantling the structure were taken in 2003 under the supervision of Croce. 2004, the intent was to ship the steel back to Ethiopia, but the repatriation project encountered a series of obstacles. 2005, the dismantled steel remained sitting in a warehouse near Rome's Leonardo da Vinci International Airport. 2008, I think it finally was brought home. I think, right? Is it erected now? I think it's finally erected in 2007, 2008. And it's now several inches shorter because they lost some of the structure in the process of taking it apart, bringing it to Italy, taking it apart again, and bringing it back. Considerable damage from a thunderstorm struck by lightning. So I don't know, pretty crazy.
There's also one thing I haven't figured out yet. I'd love your opinion, but we have enough time, yeah, on Haile Selassie, because some people are like, oh, he's basically the god emperor of Dune, right? But it's always the question: is this just another nation state split of brainwash, maybe with a nicer touch or something? But
I think, so
I
Haile
like the
Selassie
music,
was
so
Haile
that's
Selassie
what I
was
can
a
say.
Freemason, right? Like, so
Right.
there's
There you
that.
go.
And if you look into the reason why the royals were so into him, there's that also, like, because he did have a theoretically stronger line to the monarchy, but that's why they cut his country's royalty and they pushed in communists, and communists disposed of Haile Selassie. But he also gave a lot of land to the Rastas, and that's an interesting thing because he wasn't really close with the Rastas. Like, he never talked with them. He came to Jamaica once and decided not to get out of the plane, because he was like
Wow.
so confused what was going on. But if you look into I saw this on Wikipedia even the other day, but looking into Rastafarianism, some of the early, like Jabulon, the word Jah, they think comes from Royal Arch Freemasonry rituals that the British performed in Jamaica, while Jamaica was part of the British Commonwealth.
So it may just be another contrived sect. That's what I'm saying. Even though isn't maybe with some good music, but still a contrived and maybe recently created sect.
Oh, it's very, and it's okay.
I mean, this is
It has
obviously
been
officially
suggested,
recent, right?
It has been suggested the Rastafari word for Jah comes from the term Jabulion, although the name Jah, a shortened version of Jehovah, appears in the King James Bible. And Jabulion is Jabulon is the Masonic god demon, Baal, son of Baal, on the Elohim, so Jah, right? So in Duncan's Masonic rituals published in mid-19th century, he used the word recognition password in the Royal Arch degree. And although the name Jah appears in the King James Bible, the Jah also appears throughout Psalms and other Bible translations, for instance, the Darby translation and Young's literal translation. William David Spencer, in his 1999 Dread Jesus, proposed that Archibald Dunkley and Joseph Nathaniel Hibbert were among the preachers that inspired the Rastafari movement, and both were members of the ancient mystical order of Ethiopia, a fraternal order that derived from Prince Hall Freemasonry. So, there's whether or not that means that it's still the same thing. Because at a certain point, don't you become your own thing? And I think Prince Hall Freemasonry is an interesting one as well, because the idea that Freemasonry is a Moorish science and is more connected to Africa for some reason through the Moorish culture being permeated in Brazil and Africa longer, or in the Caribbean, then it is its own thing and it's its own respected sovereign thing. And maybe they're holding on to some culture that we're not aware of, right? And there's for one thing, the question of whether we all come from Israel, I think David Ewing Jr.'s new episode's gonna disrupt that theory, right? Flush it down the tubes, perhaps.
Indeed. we can get to that. So there is the one thing is just a random tidbit with this Islamic Astrolabe. I just thought it's interesting to look at. I also posted it in chat. Yeah, right. So no
There she
idea. I
is.
just randomly found it and was like, oh, it looks pretty.
Yeah, so it's interesting to me because a lot of times you see pictures of them holding a flat astrolabe and then a spheroid of the constellations. So the globe is used usually to represent space, not the Earth, right? And the astrolabe is used to represent the geocentric coordinates, or the constellations that are moving around a geostationary model. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that should be noted. So yeah, I just wanted to show it because I found it was like, fascinating, but I don't really know much about it. And then for, let's say, the last tidbit I want to bring up today in terms of agenda is, if you open the last link, it's just a wiki link. So, I have different friends, luckily, even that I know in real life, that I can talk to about, hidden history, resets, and so on. They all have different cultural backgrounds, different insights, have met different people in different types of, layers of society, however you want to call it. And so we talk about language, and we talked about this idea of all these revolutions in 1848, which I've brought up several times before, and that all these things and this new world seems to really speed up from like 1830. And then, of course, is the big question about the confusion of language. So to be clear, this is nothing I came up with, but my friend, brought this to my attention. Do you know, perchance, the way that language is being taught in the Berlitz method?
No. Well, how's the Berlitz method? Is it lexicographic or?
It's basically, I would say, total immersion. So the idea is that
I
you
imagine.
basically just get a group of people that perfectly speak given language you want to learn, and that's how you can adopt it. And then, of course, it's always the question with those kind of guys, everyone, because first I was thinking, okay, I'm going to invent different languages, and then I'm just going to make a kind of scam or something, because I
just throw a bunch of people into the Lord of the Rings world and have them learn Elvish.
Yeah, I created the need, let's say, I created different languages, so I created the need for translation and learning it, so I have a huge business. That was my thought. But then my friend was like, well, think a little bit further, because the other idea would be, what is if it is reversed, that this Berlitz school or this type or this method was specifically created to actually introduce languages in different countries? Because even then, maybe you have some adults or some managers locally, some controllers or whatever, if they're not only orphan children, right? They need to learn the language. They could certainly learn it most effectively if a new language is introduced. If they get, the whatever missionaries they have sent there, they train for some weeks or however long it takes, and then they can perfectly speak the new adapted language which is given for the particular nation state to be created or cultural division to be created. And
I wish I had the map here, because there was a bunch of language, like French was not spoken in France very much. It was mostly spoken in Germany and parts of Holland, right, and in Belgium. And Belgium also was later converted to speaking French, because it started out speaking a Dutch language, right? So all of these are forced immersions, and they all take place in the main city. They take these kids and they force them into the city, and then the city is a monastery, and then the monastery is this utopian community where everyone learns this new language.
Utopian community.
Right. Well, they're trying to teach them how to, let's say if you learn this new language, then you'll be free from sin, because you won't have the words for sin, right? You won't have the thoughts if you don't have the words.
Good one, yeah.
Take away the different kinds of love, right? Get it down to just one kind of love.
Yeah. So anyhow, I found this really interesting. And then you can look basically on the article, you just look at the founder, of foundling founder.
Maximilian Berlitz. Oh, dude, that guy's mustache is he's fighting with you right now. He wants his mustache to be better than yours. You don't let him. Don't let him.
Yeah, I'm maybe just gonna assist slaughtering his history. That'll be enough, So
I think that immersion is the right way to learn a language.
It's probably the right way, but just imagine this idea that you could train your group of individuals. You just need a few thousand, and then you send 100 to each county or whatever. They train the most important teachers and whatever. Everyone else is orphaned anyhow, or however it works.
Well, that's how Latin works
you could
now.
introduce. Yeah.
You have the elite British who still speak to each other with a little bit of Latin slur. They're
They
like,
really speak Latin?
Pater. Yeah, I mean, God, don't you ever call your mother or father mater or
Oh,
pater?
right,
I don't know,
yeah. I
like
mean,
that's
we
a
have that here too, but they don't really fluently speak it, except in the Vatican, right?
That's the irony, is that they're not speaking Latin. We've always been told this, that no one knows how they pronounced Latin. And
Exactly. And wasn't
I've
this
had
always
teachers
strange?
screaming at each other. Two teachers like, "Oh, don't go to that class. They say weenie witty weechy," and the other teacher's like, "It's vidi vidi vici," and they're just screaming at each other. No, it's very very vecchi.
And then
Oh, it's
imagine
wedi wedi vici.
they scream about a completely invented and fabricated thing, you know. But this was always upsetting to me, that you had to learn Latin in school too, and this and maths were the two subjects I was the complete worst at. Maths, because it's nothing applied and you don't learn anything about sacred geometry or anything, you know, interesting or useful. And in Latin, because they were always like, well, no one speaks it, and it was like why the F should I learn it? You know, French, no problem, other languages, because you can actually use them. In Latin, I'm learning a dead language to transcribe some ancient text, which also now we may find out may also be perfectly forged. I mean,
The
what a
trick is to
great...
learn like a legitimate dead language. Like if you learn, so I took Sanskrit and Latin. I took also, but the reason Latin was interesting was because it verified that Sanskrit was important. Because you learn Sanskrit and you're like, my namen, mama nama. Okay, so mama nama means my name is in Sanskrit, my namen in German. All of a sudden, 16 new languages open up to you because you have the dead language. But if you don't figure out which one's real, you know, that's the problem with Latin. Although Latin does have, if you know Latin, you can sound smart because every word is made up. Every professional television, right? Anything that you're using, or Greek especially, is useful, but Latin more these days. You can basically understand or make up a scientific term, and someone will take it seriously. It's very useful for making up words. And the same thing with Sanskrit, though, because then you can figure out what the roots are. That's the issue. If you don't know the root languages, then you can't make up new words and you're trapped with the old words.
Yeah, I mean, at least in those professions, of course,
I guess, yeah, you can make rap, you can make new words no matter what. You don't have to listen to that.
You could make words, I guess, new words in any language, or combine them.
But people will understand you. Like, so with
Oh,
Sanskrit,
sure, of course. Those that are in
say,
the profession, in the guild, they will understand you, even if you make up a new word, as long as it uses the existing vocabulary. Sure.
yeah, the rules, if the rules are there, you know, so you can combine concepts. I think
But
that's
then,
important.
you know, as you brought up David Ewing Jr., that in his mind, it seems, I mean, Sanskrit would be made up. What you may have also known is that all these Sanskrit documents apparently got found around 1850 by like 10 guys.
Well,
and
they
each
didn't
of them
have
found
a
thousands.
lot of, so Sanskrit was mostly spoken and sang. So we have a caste system. But the thing that really stands up for Sanskrit is that it's the computer understandable language. It's the language that when put into computers in the 80s, it was the first non-computer written language that we knew of, that computers instantly could understand perfectly, because and we still can't do that perfectly with neural recursive nets on English. English is so confusing, and every other language, translating them back and forth. Try Google Translate. It's almost there because of RNNs, but it's not perfect. But if you did it with Sanskrit, it always would be, because it's always perfect. There's no, it's so perfect. And so that's the suspicious thing about Sanskrit. Of course, it was synthesized and created. There's no question.
Couldn't this also put it closer to the original Kufic? You know, the square thing, the QR code Kufic.
Right. So the script the script we're looking at was created thousands of years later. This is not how Sanskrit looked. There was no look to it. If there was, maybe it was Kufic for sure. I don't know, because Kufic also wasn't originally Arabic, as far as I can tell. Yeah.
Just in terms of the compatibility, if this is like QR now readable code or whatever, like easily machine understandable, and you say Sanskrit is as well, then, you know, that's, I don't know, a hint to the master AI that created it all, or who knows.
There's a lot of, I mean, even if you think about it, Sanskrit is super practical. The lines across the top let you know that this word is combined. The accents let you know when a sound is changing. There's a series of vowels. I think there's 13, and there's like 46 consonants. And so you can connect a vowel to a consonant. And so you'll get, you know, let's say you take like saw and you can Sama, so Sama, and then this is adding to it, so it's Samu, right there. So you know how to combine the sound immediately because it's oo and then ma, right? So it's a combo. So it's instantly, and there's no question. And I could say, the fingers, the digits of the tree, or the fingers of the giant bush, or any which way I could say it, you'll understand I'm talking about a tree. And if there's no word for it yet, I just describe it and it becomes a word. So it's so quick to make up a word like television that it beats all, right? But they didn't have it written down at the point that they created this language or the script. So what that makes you think is either it never was, which there's enough evidence that people were singing it for centuries, but it could have been that it was all burned, right? That we lost, or it was digital or something, and we lost our copies of whatever the physical was. And so that's completely reasonable. If you look at Sanskrit from Tibet,
I mean, I love Sanskrit chanting on Psytrance tracks, so I'm not complaining about that. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But Sanskrit from Tibet's also very different than Sanskrit from India, right? It's changed a lot as well. It's different scripts. So
this looks a bit more Kufic and squarey already.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that also changes if you're using a pen. And so it was far later that they started making papyrus scrolls for the Indians to make their writings. Before that, they were using wooden sticks. Let's see if I can find Sanskrit wood or plate, maybe plate. Not like that, but stick, something like that, carving. So the old things were just literally carved, ancient something. Yeah, carved like that. And so when you carve, it makes a lot more sense a lot of the time to have straighter lines. And if you have sandstone, then you can make more curves. And I think it became kind of fancy that you could curve your work,
Definitely more artistic, I would say.
Have you seen the Potsdam Giants? That was the other thing I've been thinking about for the last
No.
week. I brought this up on Based AF because Adam's doing this awesome show with Quarter Black Garrett and Nerdrotic called Frontiers or something like that. I forget the name of it. I'm sorry, but it's great. And one of the things they talked about were giants. And he was going through all these things like the redhead giants in Peru and a lot of the things that we know about. But one of the things that they didn't talk about that I was thinking about a lot recently was the Potsdam Giants, because there were these giants that were part of the Prussian infantry, number Regiment 6, right? And what they did was Prince, who became King William, Frederick William I, Wilhelm, he loved giants, and he went around Europe and around Prussia and got as many giant people over 2 meters tall as possible. Some of them 2.5 meters tall. And he kidnapped them or conscripted them, whatever you call it, and bought them even from Ottoman Empire, and created an army of Potsdam giants and forced them to breed. He got the tallest women you could find as well, and tried to just do this for generations. And so from the 1600s until the 1800s, when it was dissolved and Napoleon had as many of these giants killed as possible, which also is kind of interesting because we think of Napoleon as short, but he isn't really short, but he is if you can pair him and them to the Potsdam giants, right? And so there were these huge guys, and then they had them wear these huge hats to make them look even taller.
And that's another relevant thought. So if we consider the possibility that many of these wars, whether Napoleon existed or not, would also have to be debated with David, but let's say there were big conflicts, and if already, some kind of hostile force or however would have taken over nation states or kingdoms or whatever, then one of the most important functions in terms of the meta system would be to regularly cull the population, especially of young males who may want to, change or proceed or demand or whatever. And you just regularly pit them against each other, condition them culturally, make them hate each other and pit them against each other, so you can make sure there will be not maybe the natural force available as a real, let's call it evolutionary force, because it's always being called away, and the rest is more easy to control that way. So
Well, this is pretty
And
true
same with
because
the
you look at
giants, because you said they bred them, so it was like, oh, that'd be great, there would be more. But then if you have all of them
killed them off,
controlled,
yeah.
and then you send them as cannon fodder, I mean, yeah.
Right. And that's a big thing they do today. If you're, over 6 foot something and they put you in the army, that was a thing for a long time. You don't want to be the tallest nail through the first hit with the hammer. But in this picture, you see these George Bush height King Wilhelm with these average height kind of Americans, looking people. Your average shorter, not American, but Prussians, right? So a lot of time was it George Bush is what, 6'6" or 6'4" or something? He's huge, 6'6".
Really? But senior.
Yeah. George
senior.
Bush height. They're both tall, aren't they? All pretty tall.
Really?
Yeah, 6'4". Height. Where's it at? They're pretty tall guys. Bush 5'11". W is, but the other Bush. 6'2", right? Yeah, 6'2" was Herbert Walker Bush. So a lot of them are pretty tall. They're decently tall. Not as tall as the Potsdam Giants, but taller than a lot of the guys that are working for them, right? So you've got these Mediterranean guys that are like Napoleon's height or something. That's what they're saying. And he's staring off, looking at his giants, and he's connecting the dots that he can have this huge army and he can build his Prussian population up, right? And then this is eventually going to be what everyone in Prussia is supposed to be like. And this is something that I think harkens back to, eugenics and everyone saying, oh man, the Germans or whatever. This is the kind of thing that was already cemented as a terror for Napoleon's period. And so they started saying, okay, we're going to kill off as many of these guys as possible. And there was a huge effort in the 19th century to hunt down people that had been Potsdam Giants.
And just now that you say that, everyone knows the term Han. And now, because I just thought about it, in German, you can say Hühne. Hühne, in this case, for a overly tall and strong being. And here they actually show a Hühnenhaft, which is maybe the literal translation for Han-like Mongol. So not Hunde, but Hühne. So H-Ü, but you can't do that because you don't have a German keyboard. I'm sending it. One N, only one N. Oh yeah, there, yeah. Yes.
I can just push Option over the U, and it'll give me my little dots.
You gotta know how to hack your keyboard. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is interesting because similar, right? Similar idea, really.
Oh, and of course here it always says because of the Mongol invasion or Han invasion during the migration, they were seen as a threat. It's always this. They're always the threat, and I also find that kind of suspicious. And I would like to know whether the giants were really so dangerous or what the real threat was that apparently emanated from them.
These giants. I mean, the thing also, though, I was thinking about Andre the Giant the other day, too. And, these giants aren't necessarily bad people. Like, Andre the Giant's probably the nicest person, that you can think about. And then they die because they're so huge. Right? His heart was so big that eventually, like, it couldn't pump that much. So it's not necessarily like they're going to be better soldiers because they're giants. I mean, he's just wanted huge people.
Yeah, I'm thinking more of like, the general diversity, because who knows, there'd be elves, gnomes, and giants and all of them. And we kind of lost that diversity in terms of the mainstream. And now there's only very peculiar cases when maybe, not too long ago, it was normal that there were just more different people. And yeah, I still don't know why they would necessarily want to kill them off or maybe make everyone conform more easily, everyone in the same box. You don't need to print so many different size t-shirts. I don't know.
I wonder. I think it's like also just, you have less need for as many people right now or something. They have more interest in mastodons. What's this article you sent?
This one I didn't send it. I don't know how you.
Really? I blame you. I don't know. I mean, so I get back into my mammoths thing, but it's every day they're getting closer and closer to releasing mammoths. You saw the mammoth Meatball You can now eat mammoth meatballs, and
They're
they're in the
gonna
process.
reconstruct their DNA, you mean, or
Yeah,
something?
they're gonna bring them back. They already have DNA, or they have the flavor. I forget exactly what it is, but it's like some sort of cloned meat of the mammoth, so you can eat a mammoth meatball. You haven't seen that? Mammoth meatball. There we go. There you go. Food firm creates mammoth meatball, long extinct mammoth. Australian company resurrects flesh of lost species to demonstrate potential of meat grown from cells. A mammoth meatball has been created by a cultivated meat company. So very soon you will be able to eat some form of mammoth meat, and it's good. Once you get the taste in your mouth, you're never going to be able to stop. That's what they're hoping. And they're going to be able to say, okay, well, now we're going to need to breed mammoths for humans to eat them. I don't know. Maybe not. I doubt it. They're probably just going to breed mammoths. I don't think they need an excuse.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm just trying to look this up because a friend recently told me.
Probably doesn't taste like woolly mammoth at all. How are you?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why you have to breed it, to find out if it really tastes like the vagina candle from Gwyneth Paltrow. Is it real?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Do you know about that? Right? Am I giving
No.
you a God, you're so protected.
Yeah,
Feel really good for you. Gwyneth
Selectively.
Paltrow sells a candle that's scented by her vagina. Yes. I mean, it's called the Smells Like My Vagina candle. And this is not April Fool's. This really exists. I mean, I moved on from this a while ago, but I still think it's interesting because it seems like witchcraft, and
Oh, that's
the
for
idea of
sure. That's the
scenting your
interesting
home
angle.
with
Mhm.
Gwyneth Paltrow. Yeah, it's just black case that's as simple. Smells like my vagina. I mean, and it's Gwyneth Paltrow. It's like not even the vagina you want to. No offense to Gwyneth Paltrow. I mean, but I'm just saying honestly, because
What is
never
she
in my
even?
life
Isn't she
have I
like
thought
an
to myself,
actress or something?
yeah, she's an actress. Yeah, and or actor, I think we're supposed to say now. Is that the thing? It's weird how that became gender neutral. But she's
Actra.
come
So,
on, she's got to be a witch, right? Like she looks like a witch. Come on.
I mean, if you do that for sure. I mean, sorry. So, because a friend mentioned this to me, I sent one more link, historicalfacts.com. I don't know how accurate it is, but I mean, I could well imagine it. It's about Coca-Cola. No, it's on the chat.
Oh, cool.
So, as a friend just mentioned, I was just now briefly looking it up. So please tell me if this is wrong or something. But that apparently, supposedly, a part of Coca-Cola is made of some kind of,
I don't know how you're
liquid.
supposed to look it up because Coca-Cola's recipe is a secret, technically. But the idea, I'm sure that if someone did some investigation, that they could probably prove it if they really
Just because
wanted.
I was thinking, of Snowpiercer or just of the modern wave now of, get some insect powder into your European Union food, apparently. And there's,
Nice.
from what I understand already, they have already been using parts of it. And, some say it's just a conspiracy and so on, but I think the regulations can just be looked up in detail. But even just in terms of all the science fiction where it's always about, oh, we're going to feed you insects, to me, it would make perfect sense if the main product they're giving everybody already contains that, which just now they want to normalize.
You got to
'Cause I
read
guess-
and watch
yeah.
Naked Lunch, right? You've seen Naked Lunch?
I'm not sure.
Oh my
Tell me about
God.
it.
So William Burroughs'
What's
Naked
on?
Lunch, the most important book, but the movie weirdly is, I don't want to say better. I feel like you should hold the book while you watch the movie. It's one of those things, but they're so different, but it's a concoction of all of Burroughs. So it's still him, but the movie is about this bug sprayer who has bug powder and he has to go around killing bugs until he realizes that the bug powder really is this like space dust, astral projection stuff that all the the secret mail order magazines that are putting it out, they're putting out the bug powder, and if you sniff it, like you can talk to Interzone. And then the typewriter is this freaking, where'd it go? This is his typewriter, right? And it's like, Jeff, you need to kill your wife. She's not really your wife, Jeff. She's not really human at all. Put some powder on me, Jeff. It's like pretty great. I mean, it's the best thing ever, and it's kind of pseudo based in real life on what really happened to William Burroughs. I mean, at least some of it, like with his wife and shooting her and going to Mexico.
The typewriter looks cool.
It's based. It is based. And then the bug powder thing, though, the bug powder will stay with you, man. And it's basically AMT. I'm convinced it's alpha methyltryptamine because this is yellow powder, you know? But the bug powder, the point that they're crushing up the bugs and they're getting the drug from the bugs until they find out that really what they need is this guy, which is like this kind of Valis, Philip K. Dick kind of thing. It's this weird, they're like sucking the juices out of its pineal glands, but its glands are more like udders.
Again. A recurring story. We just yesterday again mentioned this about dark crystal-lated resistance. You know, it's like always. Yeah.
God, it's a marvelous movie. I can't talk it up enough. I recommend it. But don't buy the vagina sex candle. I don't see a huge problem with insects in my Coca-Cola. I don't really drink Coca-Cola, so that's probably why. But
yeah, I mean, same for me. But I'm just wondering because now they want to normalize it, so it would make sense that in the prime product they have, if this is important for the controller faction for whatever reason, then they would of course put it into the most promoted product they have. Because the story with, I believe, Synonym and Pepsi and Cola, I think, and some other products is known. And Synonym is this derivative. We talked about it. Yeah. So I would totally do that. And if I can keep it super secret, it's one of the biggest. I mean, Coca-Cola, next to Donald Trump, I would say, is the biggest brand on the planet. Because every time you watch some documentary about supposed third world countries, they have nothing, but they have a Coke truck, you know?
Right.
So it's just like the frontier, and whatever is important, I think they would put it in there.
Yeah, I think about that with the reset as well a lot, the Coca-Cola truck, because after the Jesuits, Coca-Cola, you know, like really, you've got this red truck that
Great
shows up.
point, actually. This should be checked if there's Jesuit connections to Coca-Cola.
Oh, I've definitely seen priests drink Coca-Cola. A lot of the priests I know only drink Coca-Cola and don't like Pepsi. You know, I don't know if that, I doubt that's really a thing that matters, but but yeah, no, that's huge, you know. And Coca-Cola, it's an ideology. It's crazy because you're drinking this bubbly black drink, this amber, you know, liquid. Have you ever seen the Coca-Cola Kid?
No, I just know the ads say "be happy" or "happiness" or something is Coca-Cola. So they have really
well, yeah. Well, you've seen the simple. Oh my God! How about the Coca-Cola?
Or also good one is the Coca-Cola Santa Claus, of course.
That's no, the best one is the Hilltop. I'd like to hold the world at home, to buy the world a home and furnish it with love. Grow apple trees and honey bees, snow white turtle doves. You don't know this one? Oh my God. I'd like to teach the world to sing, sing with me in perfect harmony. I'd like to buy the world a Coke and keep it company. That's a real thing. I'd like to teach the world. You don't know this one? My God. Look at these like Peace Corps, mind controlled, all the faces of the world. It's before the Power Rangers. And it's what brings them together. Every single bottle has the same amber insectoid liquid.
Yeah, which is ultimately most likely
on a hilltop in Italy, you know, like by the Club of Rome. Keep going.
Yes. So let's just say it cautiously. It's maybe not the most healthy thing one could consume. But that's of course, and it's just so blatantly obvious marketing in terms of you try to combine always, of course, the most beautiful ideas, feelings, almost seems like harmony, family and stability, community, and so on. And with probably one of the products that's the least beneficial to your health and your well-being and your community and so on, both in terms of health effects, but also in terms of commercial effects or community effects and so on. Because I'm sure any indigenous or anywhere in any place, actually, people would brew their own sodas and so on with highly superior quality than whatever they even could deliver like that. But basically like level 1 Walmart in a simple way, no?
There's this movie called The Coca-Cola Kid, and it's made by this Serbo-Yugoslavian national, and it's kind of, that's interesting in and of itself because of his interest in CIA and Soviet mind control and propaganda and how things work. But he made this movie, The Coca-Cola Kid, with Eric Roberts, who is Julia Roberts' brother. And the movie's about a guy who, basically Australia's got Coca-Cola, everywhere in the world's got Coca-Cola, but there's this one sector of Australia that Coca-Cola is struggling. And so they send in the regional. So they bring in the American, the Coca-Cola kid, and he comes in and he's like, why the hell isn't everyone drinking Coca-Cola? Like, what's wrong with this office? And he goes around the street and he finds like an Aboriginally homeless musician. He picks him up. He's like, you're going to make the song, because we need to make the song for this town. So you're the sound of this town because you're on the street corner here. And then he finds there's this area where nobody's buying the Coca-Cola because there's some farmer guy who makes his own like carbonated apple drink, basically, that's all natural. So he goes in there and he's like, all right, we're going to war with this town. And he's like military boy, CIA, Virginia invasion. This is the map. This is where we're going. We're going to go in and we're going to, and the other guy's got a gun and he's trying to chase off Coca-Cola. And the whole time he's trying to get Coca-Cola into that territory. And it's a kind of a comedy, but it's very real because that's what they've done. And they've pushed to take, you go to any one of these towns and they've got a Coca-Cola machine in your building, right? And you have to sell Coca-Cola in that refrigerator.
Yeah, and simple questions. So just like we said, when is it a Jesuit, let's say, supply operation, and when is it a alphabet agency front? I mean, it's perfect, no? A base in every town or a warehouse or something, right?
They do seem like connected concepts. I mean, it's a pretty important movie if you want to see like how America goes into a place and what it does to a place. But it's also interesting because is that not just our mentality? Because we're like, part of the movie is people think he's CIA and he's really just Coca-Cola. But what's the difference really? And is it also the idea is he's the Coca-Cola kid because he's just all American. And so the training that he's gone through by being an American has put him into a position where he'll go anywhere, do anything, and not take no for an answer.
Yeah, and be happy drinking Coca-Cola.
Right. Which will probably kill you, but maybe not. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. Let me pull back to the Pensacola unveiled video.
So I just wanted to show it because I mean, many people, of course, know the channel. It's almost like, oh, here it shows Anatoly Fomenko. It's a great video for sleep teaching. I can't even say I remember any of the parts. I watched all of it, but this is just, great because it really goes into detail and really well edited, and just, one more case study of all the strange things going on. Really well done and very extensive. Nothing in particular I can say about it, but it's just, as you can see, a huge amount of content and really goes deep into this particular city. And yeah, I mean, it's just really so crazy how the same pattern, same type of buildings, same type of events in so many places. And finally, some people are, thank you, viewers and listeners, waking up and investigating this, even though when you look at it just in terms of pattern recognition, it's so obvious. There's like the same thing happening everywhere, it appears.
Yeah, we should do a thing with Dr. Longo when he has time. I know he's mostly free on Mondays, but we should try to get him on for Florida again and talk a bit about this because it's so crazy the more you dig into the Atlantis is Florida thing. And just all across the Louisiana area, like what Louisiana purchase, territory. It's crazy because there's so much more. Like people think of this area as the least populated part of the United States and with the least going on, but there's Kansas City is like Geneva. I know that sounds funny, but if you look at Kansas City, it's far more impressive than you'd think it would be, in Kansas, right? And it has underneath it giant tunnel systems, vanadium mines, giant cave systems, and it's divided in half because there's Kansas City in Kansas and on the border, Kansas City in Missouri. So it's like it's like if you took Budapest and you divided it back into Buda and Pest, which is very strange to do. So also they've got the Google fiber, right? The dark fiber. So the fastest internet in the world is there. And there's all these crazy incentives for tech corporations to move there. it's all on top of these old burned down cities. Every single one of them has, you know, a story. Like there's museums that were like the most important museum of that century, and then everything in there was from around the world. There's mummies, and it's burned down, you know, and everything's gone.
Even the checkerboard floor in the museum. I mean, what?
Yeah, I mean, that's cool. Where'd it go? I lost it. Oh no, did I go too far?
Petrified cat.
There it was. There you go. Very useful. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because like with that picture of the fire, you know, you see like people forget what these places are like, and then after the Civil War, especially, everyone's like, "Oh, the South, there's nothing there. You know, there's nothing going on at all, and there's no. Don't even look at it. Don't even go there. It's boring, right?"
Right, and just like you mentioned in the History Revised documentary, I also didn't know that, but that this was even known as the more cultured region generally. And then, of course, in history, it's always a
Right.
nice reversal. It's
Yeah,
a
I
good
mean,
heuristic. Everything is just
technology.
completely opposite to what we've been told.
The technology that was coming out of Florida and Louisiana, right? Because they had submarines, they had airships, they had train technology. They were working with electricity. You know, there's all these Dutch in Louisiana and Florida. So the Dutch were really into sciences, you know, and there were a bunch of 19th century scientific Dutch, their kids. You know, and so right after the Civil War, it was horrible for so many people. They ended up just going to Europe, and there's a lot of people from Florida and Louisiana who ended up in France, and they call it the lost Southern generation because, you know, a lot of them died. A lot of them who lived, you know, were the sons of people. They lived in a generation where there was just no opportunity, so they just had to leave. And just imagine, you know, you're so well educated, and all of a sudden you live in Baghdad, right, after it's been bombed.
Yeah, someone makes me think of Douglas Dietrich, because I try to watch a few of his shows. You know, this guy's doing 12-hour shows, you know. It's pretty, yeah.
I don't know what he takes.
Yeah, well,
I
heard from a friend, and this is even somehow on airs, but I'm not gonna talk about this now. Everyone can watch it. Oh, this is actually interesting. This is an interesting part, and this may really be relevant because in this particular episode, it's actually like a apparently censored Zoom call with MUFON. And I'm sure you know about MUFON is the, you know, UFO investigation committee, supposedly citizen-led. But from what I heard from different reporters and so on over time, is that they seem to be a front, you know, for alphabet soup, basically, and to really control the information and the outflow. And it was interesting because here you can kind of tell that they start fighting, or this Will Wakely always tries to steer the conversation into a direction when Douglas is just going on about his stuff, and I'm not even saying I have any idea whether anything he says has any validity or truthfulness to it, because I really don't know.
Well, at least about a third of it, though.
I would actually agree, but it's just interesting to see that this guy is not comfortable with it and tries to steer it away, you know? So it kind of shows that there is a, you know, controlling factor going on there. Because what Douglas basically says, one of the things, if I understood correctly, is that in the Second World War, there were a lot more, let's say, airship technology in use than we are now being taught. And also what I found really interesting, I would love to know what you think about it, is that the grays they found in Roswell, oh, this was the other connection. That's why I'm getting to it. Can you please go back to the Berlitz Corporation?
Yes.
This is really interesting. Luckily, my friend mentioned this to me. This directly connects back. Close the image and please look for, either you can find it directly or you can see, 1 second, because I have the exact link of the guy. So the guy is called, it's his grandson, basically. You have to look for the grandson of the founder. 1 second. So, Charles Berlitz. Charles Berlitz. Yes.
Oh, look at that guy. Yeah, they love their facial hair. You know what I mean? I really gotta like step it up. God, that's a good goatee. That's a kind of, I don't know. It's not quite Anton LaVey. But it's got, doesn't it have kind of like a villain vibe to it? I like it. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, who knows where it came from? But what's the interesting thing now? This guy apparently was the one who popularized the Roswell story. And this guy is the grandson of this Berlitz guy, who basically is the world founder of all language schools ever, you know? So
Wow.
interesting connection. And why? Because Douglas says that the supposed gray aliens, and I'm the first one who's in many different ways, I would say, a fan of all of these ideas, and I'm pretty sure there's many more entities than we are led to believe. But in the at least some concrete cases of the supposed recovered gray crashed aliens, he says, is what he says, Douglas, that they are basically Yakuza. So it means their pinky fingers have been cut off. They're completely shaven for different reasons because of the vehicles they were using and pressure and whatever, and burned potentially. And so they were basically, let's say, somewhat disfigured or whatever, Japanese, ex-Yakuza. And then they were just relabeled as grays, also because supposedly Emperor Hirohito or something had some advanced airships, biological weapons, if I understood correctly, or whatever exactly, some kind of a threat. And just after the war, it was important to relabel this and maybe even make up this whole alien story and Roswell crash to maybe hide some kind of defeat they had or whatever happened exactly, or to hide technology. But they knew they wouldn't want to disclose the real truth of the matter. So they could have made up at least part of this alien phenomenon to cover for that. Yeah, but everyone has to go watch his stuff. It's really, you know, it's another perspective to get around to, just like with David Ewing Jr. But this one may be a good start also because you can really see how they try to guide the conversation and they're not comfortable with him just going off about what he thinks is reality or correct. So yeah. And these interviews are actually also good because they're, in compared to some others, they're quite coherent in terms of it's easier to follow through because it's a lot of new information, and here it's a bit more methodical to, yeah.
Dude, yeah.
Trying to understand what he's on about.
And
still, I'd love you to interview him. I posted even once in their chat, but he didn't reply.
I don't know if he like must know who I am and just not like me. I was thinking he must not know who I am, but I hope he likes me. But you know, we'll find out. We'll give it a shot.
Okay.
I got my brother actually just showed up, so I was thinking, is there anything you want to cover before we cut it a little short?
We're good. We're good for now. Thank you.
Let me make sure I pull people to look at Act Like You Know 26. If you guys aren't watching this on Act Like You Know 26, jump over there and give him some extra views, and also click on the subscribe button.
We got some new David Ewing Jr. It keeps coming in, and yeah, with the big wish, let's say, or desire that if we really understand history, all this reset stuff, we can really bring peace between cultures, religions, people that maybe have been partially artificially created and are just pitted against each other for the detriment of pretty much everybody. So that's the whole mission there.
And I'm going to have a David Ewing Jr. video come out tomorrow, maybe, or the day after. I've got it pretty much done now, but I want to get it reviewed. It is not what anyone expects. It is weirder and funnier, but also it is everything that you need, and it'll tell you a lot of things about the world, and it'll make you wonder about everything. It's changed a lot of my thoughts.
It will definitely make you wonder.
Yeah, that's the fact. Raph, I love you, man. Everybody, thank you for being here. We'll see you later on at Wednesday Ultra. Peace.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarian.
Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian. Tartarian. Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.